Okay, so in this video I plan to cover healing in Silmaril. Alright, so one important thing to understand on Silmaril is priorities. Okay, so priorities is basically when a character is going to execute a certain action. So I'm going to be on Morwen, that's my Geomancer. And as an example, I will just enable a couple things. Okay. So it's relatively straightforward, top to bottom, right? So the action that she's going to perform first, if she's out of range, she's going to run, then she'll cast Cure. She'll check to see if anyone needs a Cure, and then check to see if anyone needs a Curaga, and then Cura. So, you know, docking through that, a character can only perform one action. So if it checks for Cure and decides it needs to set a Cure, it's going to Cure. Because of that, you're probably almost never going to cast Curaga. So instead, you'll almost always want to put Curaga above a Cure. So that if the condition's met, say for instance you have 3 players that are low on hit points, it'll cast Curaga. That's it. It allows you to have a lot of control over what your players do and when. So it can be problematic, like I said, that your behaviors might not do what you want it to do. Always review your priority orders. Okay. So in this case, maybe you do want her to move in range before she does it. Obviously, Kira. Typically, if I do go and inflict this misery, it's going to be something like this, with the Kiraga tiers disabled below, for instance, like 3, right? And then maybe only Kira 2 and 3 enabled. So there's a combination. It's pretty neat. Kira works really well because when you're in Inflictus Misery, if you have the SU5 staff, you can take like 5 debuffs off at once. So like Shinryu fights are really fun. But anyway, I had to talk about priorities. Very important, relatively straightforward, but it does affect the characters and their behaviors. Also, one note: if you add by double clicking, or you can use these arrows. There's different ways to do it. But if I turn this off, if I move it from the priority order, it actually turns it off. So if I just peek over to healing, you can see I have cures enabled and I never click that. But if I uncheck this, I come back, cure's gone. If I put cure on, there's cure. Take cures off, it's disabled. That's how it works. So this is kind of like your global. If you're reviewing a character after setting it, I would always come here just to see, all right, this is what the character's doing, and this is the order they're going to do it in, right? Because if you think you have something turned on and it's not here, you don't have it turned on, right? So let's talk about healing now. Turn off this. Okay, so you can go to your equipment views. These are typically like your character base stats, and then your equipment, whatever. Why do I say whatever? The ultimate goal is to get these numbers correct, right? So, let's just say my cure 4 and my geomancer is really realistically probably only like, 860, whatever, something like that. We'll just go with that, right? So these numbers don't have to be exact. You can put 500, 500, 500, and use sliders to just visually do it, or you can let it the math out. But basically, what I didn't cover is priorities. I jumped over to a different tab, got right into it too quick. Okay, so just like the global priorities, there is a curing priority list too, if you so choose. If you choose auto party cure, you can't select priorities because it's simply just in your party who's the lowest hit point percent. Like that for Alliance 2, it makes it really easy. Click a button and away they go. Otherwise, I almost never do that. I personally like to use my priorities I want my monk, who's probably tanking most of the time, to be the highest priority. Maybe I have, for instance, I have a backline bard or something, right? I could put that lower priority. Now, high priority, if you so choose, you can enable it. And for instance, I'm going to select the first person, which is Turin. But if I select the first two, it's Turin Morwin that are now considered high priority. What does high priority give you? It has a separate slider. So they're going to be cured at 85%. Everybody else has to be below 75% before the cure check passes. So that's what high priority does. Overcure. All right, so overcure. Say for instance, I'm just going to change this one to like 200 or so, just to make it nice, easy. All right, so my cure 2 is 200 hit points. If I require, or if I set my overcure to 30%, that means the player has to be more than just really easy math, 170 hit points. Not quite, because 30% of 170 isn't 200. It has to be like 175 or something. But the point is it's only going to allow you to cure if you're only over by 30%, right? If not, it's going to go to the lower tier. And if I'm at 170, it's going to actually cast Cure, because Cure 2 is too much. It's beyond 30% more than you need. I would say, generally speaking, 30% is around the best number you're going to run. It's pretty good if you do the math between each one of these tiers. It's right around 30%. It's pretty good. But if you want to dial back because you're over curing, maybe you set these wrong. I don't know, but like you can change these to have a hard threshold. Like this means you can never cure the tier more than your hit points down. So obviously, at that 170, he or she will never cast Cure 2, because this is 200, and that's more than 170. That's all I'm going to talk about. Priority promote. All right, this is a fun one. So this is where you get even more selections in it. I talked about, priorities. Goes down the list in curing. But what happens is Luthien is like 1,000 hit points too low, and Turin is like 200 hit points. Well, it's a priority list, so it's going to go to Turin and say, "Yep, sure enough, he's a high priority. He's below 85%. I'm going to toss him a cure." But you're like, "Well, no, my Bard, for instance, might be almost dead." That's where this priority promote comes into play. So I got some tool tips here in this particular case. What it does is it calculates the difference between the person it's going to cure, or at least selected to cure, and the next one in the list. In this case, the very first one, we'll just call it Turin. And, looks like I got Maedhros in yellow. Right, so those two. Say there's 200 hit points delta between what needs to be cured. It then takes this number and divides by it to determine how many spots it moves up, right? So, for instance, if I set it to like 3%, it's going to move up quicker. 0 is literally the lowest, percentage. So that means Maedhros will get cured without a question, even though Turin is high priority and does need cure. That's what priority promote. That's what I call it. It's promoting in this priority list. Okay, so I would say a good number 4%, right? So I'll just give you a quick example why I'm here. On Morwen, Maedhros is low on hit points. Turin is not. I would suspect that she's going to cast Maedhros based off the 3% promote, right? It's not a hard fast silence, but there you go. So actually, like you see, Maedhros is mid tier here on the list, but he was still cured before. But what we can do is, I'm going to stop her. What we can do is make it tougher for him to get a promotion and get cured. So I'm just going to tab over, take some hit points off again, repeat the same thing, and show you kind of how that works. Okay, so I bumped this up to 10. So now I think that's fairly steep, which means this player won't be able to bubble up the 4 spots I think it needed. 1, 2, 3, 3 spots. And so instead, Turin is probably going to be cured first. And there you go. Turin was, even though he didn't need it as much, that's how it's going to work. So typically, I would recommend 3 to 4%. Get the good balance. I found I usually do 3%. That's actually one of the more trickier things to understand of the whole curing. But it actually, once you get it dialed in and you understand it, it actually is pretty good. Allows you to kind of behave more like a kind of a human would, and prioritize tanks and so forth. Full cure, obviously just a white mage only thing. Curaga, really not any difference here, right? You're just going to enable it, set it. The only difference is really the number of players. I recommend 3. Kira, same thing here. Nothing different. Raises, all this is relatively straightforward. You don't really, I mean, you can just, read through it. Jigs and blue magic are not enabled. Jigs are probably going to be, I'm going to probably do those fairly soon here. But that is healing. That's what I want to talk about. Generally, the things that'll trip people up is if you drop and swap party members, say for instance you have another human, another random, party member come in, this is dynamic. This will in Alliance, these names will populate. It just takes it from your Alliance list or the party list. So you'll have to move it over if you don't auto party. If you're swapping parties all the time, you can just be like, yep, auto party. It's going to do lowest hit points first and not worry about it. Don't have to worry about all these priorities, priority promote. Like that's obviously disabled because there's no priority list to promote them in. But if you're doing a lot of multi-boxing and it's just pretty much mostly you and your 6 party, I would probably recommend doing this and fine-tuning it a lot. Typically, I main box on Turin, so he's going to get mostly aggro, rounding up enemies or tanking or the main DPS. So that's kind of where this kind of really benefits, is having, high priority list and doing a little bit of tuning. It's not too bad. I'd say just go with it, and then make sure you have around 3 to 4. Start with 3 or 4%, and do some ambuscade, do some content, play around with it, and see how you heal. Hopefully that was help. Clears up some of the questions that you might have in healing. I think my next video I'll probably do enhancing. So, all right, thank you.